As you create your characters for your very first scene, for these open scenes, you're going to be working on filling out your score. So some important information to think about, because you're going to be focusing on creating an action, an objective, and an obstacle. Remember that your actions are always stated as to plus a verb. For example, to examine, to frustrate, to encourage. This lets you know how you're going to actually say or deliver the line. It is the action behind the actual line that you're saying. Now, when you're putting together your actions, actions should never be stated as to be. We don't play states of be. We don't play to be happy or to be angry or to be sad. The reason that is because it doesn't really mean anything. One person's happiness can be very different from another person's happiness. So when you ask someone to just be more sad, as an actor, you tend to ask the question, well, what exactly does that mean? So to recap, when you're doing your actions, they're always to plus whatever the verb is that you're playing, not a state of being. We're not going to be anything. Next, you have your objectives. Your objectives are what you want. They should always begin with the phrase, I want. Characters always want something. It's never, I don't want. As an example, you might think that I don't want to go to class today, but what you actually mean is I want to stay home and sleep in. So if you ever find yourself, as you're putting your character together, thinking, I don't want this, well, then think about what is it that the character actually does want. When we want things, it propels us forward. It moves us forward. Playing negatives keeps us stable in one place, doesn't actually move us through the scene. Now, your obstacles are what the character must overcome to reach their objective. Without obstacles, there is no conflict. So if you think about what it is that you want, and you think about what it is that you don't want, what you don't want is your obstacle. It's what you're actually playing against. For example, if you want to stay home and sleep in, your obstacle is that you have to go to class today. So if you find yourself thinking about the things you don't want, those aren't objectives, but they very well could be the obstacles that you're fighting against to get what it is that you actually want. So as you're putting together your score, remember that every line has to have a different action, objective, and obstacle. There are no repeats. Because characters only continue speaking because they have not reached their overall or their super objective. Therefore, different actions or tactics have to be played. If we get what we want from the very first thing we say, there's no reason to continue communicating. So it becomes real important for us to continue upping the ante, having stronger objectives, stronger actions. We can't keep playing the same thing over and over again. I give the example, you have a child who is moving towards a busy street corner, and the mother is trying to stop the child. And she says, no, no, no. And then finally on the third no, the child stops. She was playing a different action every single time. Even though it was the same word, she kept increasing her action until she finally got what she wanted, which was the stopping of the child. It's the same thing when you're doing your scene. You have to keep changing the tactic and the objective until you ultimately get what it is that you want. Keep in mind that your score is a rehearsal tool. Actors use it when they're still on book, excuse me, or when they haven't learned their lines yet. So you want to be able to make those choices as you play them, as you decide what it is that you want your character to be. If you wait and fill in the entire score when you're already done and haven't done the work, then the actual tool hasn't worked for you. Keep in mind also that your first choice is rarely the best choice. You can arrive at the best choice by trying several different options. So it's important that you give yourself some things to play, but don't assume that just because you have given that tactic or that action or objective to play, don't assume that that is your only choice. We usually have to play several things to be able to get at that best choice for the scene. I do recommend that you complete your scores in pencil. This gives you the flexibility to erase and to make changes. Uh, it's difficult to submit a digital file to me that would be done in pencil. Obviously, you'd think about typing it. But what I would ask you to do is to fill it out in pencil and then take a picture of it and email me the picture. If that's not possible, then a digital format where you've typed it in is fine. This is an unusual circumstance with us doing the course online like this. But I still want you to have the flexibility and the freedom to make changes if you have to, based on discoveries that you make between you and your scene partner. Concerning blocking, obviously, if we were doing these on stage, there would be some stronger blocking choices, but because we're going to be doing these in a remote format, your blocking or your staging is probably going to be more directly related to maybe some gestures or some facial expressions. But if you are being specific with those and incorporating those into your scene, make sure you note that in the blocking category. You'll also notice on the form that there are some different references and shorthand for blocking. Also not as important when we're doing a digital or a Zoom version of our scene, but it is really good information as an actor for you to know what is the difference between stage left and stage right. Something to keep in mind when it comes to those terms is that it's always from the actor's perspective. So if you're standing on stage and you go stage right, you are moving towards your right. Or if you go stage left, you are moving towards your left. The person who is sitting in the audience, as you move towards your left, to them, it looks like that you're going to the right. So just keep in mind that you're always doing it from your perspective. The other thing with stage directions is that upstage and downstage. Downstage is the actor moving as close to the audience as possible. Upstage is the actor moving further away from the audience, which sometimes can seem different in terms of how we use the phrases up and down today. So keep those things in mind. Won't come into play as much with our video work, but it is something really good for stage actors to know. So that is my brief overview of how the blocking and how the score works. If you have questions about that, obviously you can email me. But hopefully that makes sense, and have a lot of fun as you're creating your characters and starting to document that information in terms of how you're going to play those choices.